Hey, Wormy Horror here. The following 3 stories are true to the best of my knowledge and can be found on the subreddit Let's Not Meet. If you enjoy the stories, please feel free to like it, comment, and subscribe, especially if you'd like to keep updated with the channel and when I upload new videos. Without further delay, please enjoy the following 3 true creepy stories. Number 1. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, my mother had finally broken up with her wealthy yet abusive boyfriend. We had recently moved back to my hometown of Sacramento from Kingman, Arizona, and I was having trouble adjusting to our new life. Where before we lived in big, nice houses in beautiful communities with very little crime, my mom, now being a single mother of 2, moved us into a small townhouse community in not the best of neighborhoods. Luckily, I had met a girl at school whom I really connected with. By chance, she happened to live in a complex across the street, and we quickly became inseparable, as did our moms. It was not unusual for them to be at our house late into the night, them drinking and laughing in the living room, and us giggling and gossiping about the boys at our school upstairs in my room. Well, this particular night was no different. It was pretty late, so we decided to just have a sleepover. My best friend and I ran across the street to her empty house to grab her blanket and sleepover bag. We were laughing as we walked up her driveway, but she stopped suddenly, and all the color drained from her face. No one was home, but all the lights were on in her house, and the front door was wide open, while a shadow danced on the wall. Terrified, we ran back to my house and burst through the door, both crying and babbling about a man being in the house. My uncle, who happened to be staying with us for a short while, ran over, but by the time he got there, the door was shut, locked, and the house was dark. The adults laughed and told us that we were imagining things, and that we watched too many scary movies, and that it was late and that we were tired. We both knew what we saw, and it never really left our minds. Weeks went by, and strange things started happening in her house. Doors that were closed would be open when we came back. Things in the rooms would be rearranged. Clothes and underwear started to go missing, but they were still convinced that nothing weird was going on, until one night. It was late, and I was spending the night with my friend at my house. My older sister was babysitting us, and we were playing Donkey Kong Country. We soon got bored, and my best friend mentioned that she had Mario Kart in a box in her garage. The light was broken, and their landlord was more of a slumlord and never fixed anything. So we grabbed flashlights and went to search. She knew the box was in the far back corner, so we made our way around piles of junk, when she suddenly tripped and fell. She stood up, and we both pointed our flashlights at what she had fallen over, and it was a pile of blankets that clearly weren't hers. We realized that someone had made a little cubby hidden in their barely ever used garage, and we also found a hole that led outside that someone had sought out. Needless to say, we screamed and ran inside as my sister called 911. Turns out someone had been living in the garage for weeks, if not months. Since they didn't have a washer-dryer in there, they rarely, if ever, ventured in there, so no one had ever noticed. The hole the person sawed in the wall faced the back of a building, and no one ever went back there, so it wasn't visible from the street or driveway. Worst of all, they found a ton of stuff in there that the person had been sneaking in the house to steal. Dirty underwear, food, pictures, etc. When he heard them leaving and knew the house was empty, he would just come inside through the door and go through their things, eat their food, and use their bathroom. The guy never came back, and they never caught him. The scariest part is that I spent the night there often, and who knows what could have happened had he been violent. Or maybe he was violent, and was waiting for the right time to strike. Luckily for us, we'll never know. Number 2. I began babysitting when I was 13 to earn extra money to spend on horribly embarrassing things, like Fall Out Boy CDs. I would almost always work for my dad's clients and get referred by word of mouth. I was babysitting for this one family who had a little girl who was 9 and a little boy who was 7. The parents seemed okay, if a tad crotchety, even giving me a full schedule to follow. Almost immediately after the parents left, the little girl sings in a creepy, high-pitched voice.
"We're all alone now."
"I know," the little boy chimed in. "Let's play rape." Looking back now, I know the kid probably just heard the term on TV, knew the word was shocking, and said it just for a reaction. I totally bought into it at the time, sputtering wide-eyed and changing the subject quickly. These kids were hell for the next hour. I wouldn't let them watch South Park on the TV because their parents did not seem like the type that would allow their precious 7 and 9-year-olds to watch a show like that. As soon as I said no, the little girl said casually, "Oh, that's fine. We'll just go play PlayStation in the family room. Feel free to watch it out here." I knew exactly where that was headed. I said they could watch any other TV show in the living room while I made them dinner. The parents had left instructions to make them sandwiches. I could handle that, I thought. Before I had even got out the bread, I heard a massive crash. It seemed like the little girl had broken a glass, fussing and pissed, but ultimately with no way to punish her, I cleaned it up while these two incredibly weird kids watched with wide eyes. I dumped the broken glass into the trash, and I went back to make a sandwich. I'm a vegetarian, so while the kids had chicken, I had made a simple salad, one for myself. Just as I was finishing, the little boy screamed out in what seemed like faked pain. Nonetheless, I ran over to the couch in the living room to check on him. "My ankle," he howled, dramatically flopping back into the couch. While I tried to figure out how he had hurt his ankle, the little girl slipped out of the room. Peripherally, I was aware of this, but I didn't really pay any mind because I was focused on this little boy pretending to be in pain. He kept saying, "I went to stand, but it hurt too much. I don't know," over and over, until his eyes suddenly flicked to just behind me, where I could see the little girl standing with a tormenting smile on her face. He was miraculously healed. Yeah, right. At this point, I was just thinking these kids were really weird, craved attention a little too much, and probably needed more parental involvement. Whatever, I was 13, and that $60 was only 4 hours away. I set out the sandwiches for the two to eat at the dining table, went to get a soda, and returned. After pouring soda for the both of them, I realized they hadn't even taken a bite of their sandwiches yet. I asked them what they were waiting for. They smiled. "For you to take a bite of yours," they said. I'm so glad I had a gut feeling to open the top part of the bread of my sandwich, because when I did, I saw glass. Broken glass. The broken glass that I had just put in the trash. I stared in horror at the two little kids. "You could have really injured my mouth," I said. "What's wrong with you two?" Instead of crying or apologizing, or pretending to be ashamed or confused, these two little fuckers began laughing. Not like kids. It was too low. It wasn't that silly, free laugh that kids often do. It was low and threatening. I'll never forget that noise. My immediate reaction was, these kids are too young to be laughing like that. I called my sister, who was 17 at the time, cried about what had happened, and she came and took over for me. We left the house with chills after the parents arrived. I never babysat for those two again. What I can't get past me is the level of premeditation that went into sprinkling that broken glass in my sandwich, and the totally remorseless way that they had responded to me getting upset. They were unlike any two kids I've ever met before. Number 3. When I was about 4 years old, I had a playground fall that resulted in a serious cut to the back of my head that required stitches. A few weeks later, my dad took me back to the doctor to have them removed. I was very brave and sat very still for the doctor, unlike the huge fuss I made when they put the stitches in. So as a reward, my dad got me an ice cream and took me to the beach for a paddle. It was a very small Australian town, and the beach was quite secluded. Even though it was the middle of summer, there were only a handful of slightly older children swimming. mind you, without their parents. My dad walked me down to the water's edge and warned me sternly to stay in the shallow water and not to go in any deeper than my knees. Then he disappeared. I imagined to use the public restroom or something similar. I know that looks bad, but he wasn't a bad father. As I mentioned before, he could just be a bit irresponsible and absent-minded sometimes. But he meant well. It often drove my mom insane. There was an older boy, about 10 years old, or possibly a little older. He was paddling around a few meters away, but he slowly came in closer, leaving the other children. Then he called out to me. I remember he had blonde hair and was smiling brightly. He asked me what my name and age was. I answered, also filling him in on all the important details about my trip to the doctor that morning, emphasizing that I had been a very brave girl in order to impress him. My story seemed to amuse him, and he asked why I didn't come out and swim a little deeper. I explained that I wasn't allowed in past my knees until my dad came back because I couldn't swim very well yet and would get into trouble. He assured me that I couldn't possibly get into trouble if he was teaching me how to swim, and besides, my dad wouldn't see because he had gone. When I was still hesitant, he added, "Are you scared? I thought you were brave." So I followed him out until my feet couldn't touch the bottom, and he immediately held me underneath the water. I struggled, but he was more than twice my age and size. I realized now that he had taken me out willingly so the other kids wouldn't know what he was up to. Drowning an unattended young child really is the perfect crime, because you could very easily pass it off as an accident. Probably only moments before I lost consciousness, the boy abruptly let go, and my dad lifted me out of the water. I can still see the look of bewilderment mixed with fear and rage on my dad's face. Then, for what seemed like a very long time, he patted my back while I screamed, sobbed, and coughed over his shoulder. By the time I was settled and my father was satisfied that I was okay, the boy and the other kids were long gone, although my dad still went driving around looking for them. Had that kid stuck around, I'm quite certain my dad would have killed him. If you enjoyed the previous stories and would like to hear more similar creepy stories, then 2 of my previous videos are linked to in the description and can also be seen by clicking the annotations on the screen. If you liked the video, please show your support by subscribing, liking, sharing, and commenting on the video. Additionally, if you'd like to hear more of my stories, please feel free to subscribe so that you will be notified of any new videos I post. Thanks for watching, and stay safe.